Good afternoon, everybody. Calling to order the March 12th meeting for Environmental Matters Committee. For roll call, have Alderwoman Conti.
Here.
Alderman Huntley will be here shortly. Let's see. So as far as approval of the agenda, we do need to add, let's see, R126. Because that's performance standards for fiscal year 27, just because we forgot we actually postponed action on at the last committee meeting. So we just need to put that back on here. And so could I get a motion to add that and postpone ID 626 to next meeting, which is the stormwater presentation?
Motion to postpone. Am I seconding? So moved.
I'll second it since Alderman Huntley's not here. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. And I have minutes from February 12th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And then for legislation, we have 0226, mooring requirements in city waters. So I believe, I'm looking at the deputy city manager. If you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm under the impression that we're still waiting on a report from port wardens. And then I heard staff might be working on some changes to this legislation.
Jackie Geil, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. We don't have a report from port wardens, but it can go before port wardens again. I mean, it can go before port wardens and we can get their opinion on it.
I thought it went to them already, but we were just waiting on their findings. I could be mistaken. I thought that's what I heard.
We're waiting on findings. All right.
Okay,
We'll
yeah,
speak,
so it's already
we
been
will
to-
speak to the chair about the findings then.
I don't know if they had any findings, but
Maritime Advisory Board, we're waiting for their findings, and then the court wardens has yet to finish.
Yes.
okay.
It's the Maritime Advisory Board, right, Caitlin? Because I didn't believe the port wardens had considered this at all.
Sorry, it's Maritime Advisory.
Okay.
Okay, Maritime
Okay,
Advisory
that makes
Board.
more sense.
Okay. Actually, Frida, are you still on the Maritime Advisory Board? Do you have any information on, it hasn't come to the board yet?
We looked at it, but I think we deferred it for further information.
Yep.
We haven't made
They have a meeting on the 17th, on Tuesday.
Okay. And is staff working on changes, or is that?
There are some changes. We discussed them yesterday. We were discussing mostly how to deal with illegal moorings that exist in Weems Creek, which we're going to deal with separately outside of the legislation. It doesn't need to be part of this legislation, and just going over some of the language to make sure it's clear. Alderman Thorpe wanted to add language about no private moorings are allowed in city waters. That's currently in the draft. And I don't think, Cynthia, Ms. Reuter will have to tell me if there's any further changes that have been made so far. We've just made the language very clear on what's a transient mooring and what's an annual mooring, making clear that they are actually city-owned GPS points and not private moorings. That was the main confusion and why some residents became kind of concerned about the legislation, was they thought that private moorings are being taken away, when in fact those are annual moorings that are leased each year with a contract with the harbor master's office. When you get a GPS coordinate, you can put in your own tackle and anchor if one's not existing. If you decide not to release that mooring, you can take your tackle with you. Most people would not bother the expense or the trouble of taking the anchor with them, but otherwise they just turn it over to the city as city property. But you're leasing a GPS point. You do not own that GPS point.
So if somebody installs one on their own,
That's
that
illegal.
becomes, okay.
Yeah.
Because if Maritime Advisory, you can come up if you want to speak to Okay. You can just take a seat, Ms. Wadley, and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Frida Wildy, 403 Chesapeake Avenue, member of Maritime Advisory Board. I just looked at our agenda next week, and we are scheduled to do a revote on this legislation.
Okay.
But that may change given what sounds like is going on.
Right. We'll
Okay.
have revised legislation. I was just discussing this with the harbor master today. So I think it's in good shape now to present to Maritime Advisory Board,
Okay.
and they can make a recommendation. They're an advisory board. They don't make a determination.
Okay. I just have two concerns, questions. One has to do with which you spoke to a degree, as far as if there are private moorings or not, because we did have public testimony that there were some. We also heard when I went to the Severn River Commission that they're under the impression, I haven't sat down with this particular member yet, but under the impression that in Weems Creek, and this goes into my second issue, that the county, they're saying the county does allow private moorings. And so we'll need to figure out how that's going to be handled in Weems Creek. My understanding is that the county would probably be fine with us taking full enforcement on Weems Creek and applying our standards to the whole creek. Personally, what I don't really want is to have two different standards split down the middle of the creek.
Ms.
So-
Leonard is here. She can address the memorandum of understanding that the
Okay.
county and the city have with regard to Weems Creek. The water body is split down the middle.
Yeah.
With one side being the city's waterway, the other side being the county's. And until recently, when we had better GPS, we could not determine which mooring buoys were on each side, but we can now. And the harbor master has been out to Weems Creek to identify if there are any moorings that we installed, but there are none. They're all illegally installed. They don't even belong to riparian. There's 3 of them. They don't belong to any riparian property owner. They're just people who put them in to moor their boat to them. So Ms. Leonard's here. She can speak to the MOU further, what she's doing with that now.
Ashley Leonard, Assistant City Attorney. So the original MOU, which is about 10 years old at this point, gave very limited enforcement powers. So we're not allowed to exercise full enforcement powers in the county side of Williams Creek. I have reached out to the county's Office of Law, my counterparts there, to discuss, because the MOU is 10 years old, to just sort of, possibly do a new one and update it one, and for them to possibly consider giving us broader enforcement powers, but I don't know at that point. But so at this point, unfortunately, we would be applying essentially different standards depending on which side of Williams Creek you're on.
Okay.
And at this point, the city does not have any enforcement authority with those mooring balls that are on the county side. And there are
Right.
some definitely on the county side.
Okay.
And some of them go out into the Severn as well.
Okay. All right. Well, it's just my I don't know, my engineering mind just seems like it would make more sense to have a common standard on the whole creek, but we can certainly,
And Ms. Leonard's
Dig
working
into that
on
a little
that.
more.
Like I said, we are pursuing it, and I'll keep you updated, but ultimately some of it is what the county is willing to delegate to us authority-wise.
and I need to circle up with Alderwoman O'Neill because I believe she's been in conversation with some of the
So
Weems Creek
Those
residents on both
illegal
sides.
those illegal mooring balls in Weems Creek that are on the city side, we do have enforcement authority over those. We will require those to be moved or to be abandoned. Ms. Bellis will be in touch with those people who have their boats moored there illegally. We will give them some grace time to move them. But I think she's drafted a letter right now that I just reviewed.
Okay. Alderman Huntley?
Yeah, thanks. So I've been talking about this extensively with Alderman Thorpe, and he seems like he's really kind of on top of things. My question here was just now, you're talking about moving them. Do you mean move the boat or move the mooring?
They can either move their own mooring, they put it in illegally, or they can move the boat, leave the mooring, we consider it abandoned, and then we can remove it.
And are we sure we can't just I don't want to use the wrong word here, Ms. Leonard, but are we sure that if we are requiring them to no longer use that mooring because this is public property, that those are not suitable for city use?
They're not in a location that the city would put them in that location in the first place.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. That explains it. Just a statement of opinion. I'd say like people putting in moorings in public waters. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for it. To me, it's a little like I bought that bridge in Brooklyn Fair and Square. So I think it sounds like you're more or less of that mindset also.
Right.
And just want to express my support for that.
One woman who testified, her boat is actually on a mooring buoy that's on the county side. And she explained to me that she bought the boat that was tied to the mooring and was told that the mooring came with the boat. But the owner of that vessel had no right to tell her that in the first place.
Like I said, bridge in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I bought that car and it was on the bridge. The bridge comes with it, right?
Are there any other questions or points for staff? Okay, so I'd be inclined to accept, I would like to accept a motion to postpone until we get further information from staff and Maritime Advisory Board.
So
Further information on what?
I just mean, well, if there are any amendments that staff's working on.
No, not this time. Ms. Reuter, do you have any additional that have come in today? Ms. Reuter? Cynthia? Do you have any additional amendments that have come in today on the mooring requirements?
No, just waiting for sign off on amendment 1.
Is that from the administration or is it from
Alderman
council?
Thorpe?
I thought of something else. I wanted to
Yes,
ask
he
you.
is that.
Sorry?
Which one is that?
Talking about mooring homes, right?
You're right.
It's amendment 1. It deals with repairing.
Oh, riparian rights.
Well,
Okay.
who's the sponsor?
Thorpe.
Thorpe, or is it?
Okay, I know what he's talking about, because it's something I mentioned to him yesterday. So in the rare case, that doesn't exist right now, but possibly could, especially if shoreline erodes or something, if you're a riparian property owner, you may put a private mooring ball in your developable waterway. We're not saying we're taking that away.
Okay,
There are currently none of those.
yeah.
But if under some scenario, somebody possibly could do that. I think that's what Alderman Thorpe is addressing.
Assuming it's even deep enough. All right. Well,
Oh, this is Littman.
we don't need to dig into it today. I just wanted to get some things out there and wait till the Maritime Advisory Board to do something else.
Yeah, sorry, I did have one other question. So again, this is sort of an opinion I'm hoping you can react to. I totally understand the need for why we don't want people long-term anchoring in waterways over the winter.
We're not talking about that legislation. We're talking about the mooring requirements legislation.
Oh, I'm
Two
sorry, I
separate
thought it was
things.
in there. Yeah, okay, never mind. I thought it was in there. Isn't anchoring?
No,
the same thing?
that is, we don't even have legislation introduced on anchoring. That was just a recommendation made by the harbor master's office. And then some people have testified about it. They became concerned about it, but nothing's been introduced by anyone.
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. I thought it was part of this legislation as well.
No.
Okay, so is there a motion to
Yeah.
postpone?
So, well, you were saying you didn't want us to postpone it, no?
This legislation, I mean, this is up to you. This legislation was introduced just to make a technical correction as part of the 75-foot measurement correction. And we needed this correction to be made before the city submitted its approved its design for the reconfiguration of the mooring field in front of St. Mary's School.
Right.
So therefore, we made this correction to the code so half of our mooring balls would not fall out of compliance with our own code. As part of that technical correction, the city was making the correction that there's a reference to private mooring balls, which are actually annual mooring balls.
Right.
Throughout that section of the code. So the city took this opportunity to make that correction as well.
Got it.
That's what a lot of testimony was about. People were concerned we were taking away private rights, which weren't there anyway.
Right. You can't have private rights to the public bridge or waterway.
So is there any concern with postponing action until next meeting?
It just delays us on the work we can do on the mooring
Yeah.
field.
That's fine. I mean, so if the committee wants to do something different, but I did tell the Maritime Advisory Board rep for Ward 7 that I was going to
You were going to
postpone
postpone? Okay.
because I wanted to wait for their information.
I mean, that's kind of what we have the board for. The question to me is it adequate to have their advice by the time this goes to the full council, or do we want to have their advice to talk about it in committee? Do you know when they're meeting next?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So we would get it before the next council meeting, but not before the next, well, yes, we would get it before the next environmental
Well, I
matter.
also told Alderman Thorpe it was going to get postponed today.
Okay, well, I'm fine to postpone it.
Okay. Is there a motion? Is
So
there a
moved.
motion? All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. All right, and then next up, City Doc presentation. Director Burr, thank you.
He's the only director we call by his first name. Director
Oh,
Burr.
yeah.
I have a last name for a first name, so
Keep doing that.
it happens a lot. I'm Burr Vogel, Director of Public Works.
Okay.
Okay, to introduce the topic that I've been asked to address, it's about the flood barrier types for the City Dock project. This is a flood barrier slide we've been using for a number of years, and what's important here is that the areas in pink are going to be fixed walls up to our design flood protection level of elevation 8, North American Vertical Datum, that's NAV for short. And then everywhere else where you see yellow or orange or blue, there has always been an intent to have some sort of deployable flood barrier. So sometimes you'll hear passive deployable flood barrier or manually deployable flood barrier. Another term we've used is self-rising flood barriers. So in the very beginning of the project, everything was going to be automatic, and nobody would have to go out there and manually deploy a flood barrier to make this system work. Over time, as we've received costs, that has changed. So I'm here to address 6 specific questions, which I'll give a rundown on. And then I think what might make the most sense is I just give a brief summary of the answers, and then we can go back and go into depth into any one of them. So question number 1, is the technology finalized? Yes, all deployable barriers in the current design are going to be manually installed. Why did we make this shift? Two key factors here. One was high cost, and we'll get into those particular savings later. And then also, we are expecting a substantial amount of settlement in a certain area of the park, and that would have made the passive flood barriers really something that couldn't be delivered with any kind of a warranty, because they would no longer function. The manually deployable barriers will be easier to adjust. Where would we store these barriers? They are going to have a physical footprint, probably somewhere 2 to 4 small trailers, which we would park. Currently, we have the Spa Road site available. If at some point in the future that's no longer available, the water tanks the water tank sites make the most sense. Jan Wall near Tyler Heights Elementary would be a great candidate. And time to deploy. So kind of look up how many feet a crew can do, and it works out to be a crew of 8 would be able to deploy everything we would need in a day. But just being conservative, we would plan for 2 days. And then would we need to, related question, would we need to train? Yes, absolutely. I would train our kind of primary crew of 8 with 4 backups. And that would be an annual event, which would also serve as an opportunity to inspect the barriers, because they will have rubber gaskets at the interfaces with the side or the posts, as well as rubber gaskets between each of the planks. And then how often would we have to do this? So right now, this would be something we would expect to have to deploy the full system maybe once a decade. There are one or two low-lying areas that maybe that would be more frequent, but that would be it wouldn't be anywhere near a crew of 8 for a day. It would be 2 people for an hour or two to install those in the few low-level gaps. For reference, the bulkhead, the concrete bulkhead that runs from currently 110 Compromise or the Chop Tank building all the way around to the Dock Street businesses at Craig Street, that's at elevation 4.5. That was built several years ago. It has never been overtopped. So we would, how often has that in history, the water in this area gotten to that level? It's only been twice. In the 1930s, there was a large hurricane, and then, of course, Hurricane Isabel in 2003. Here's a diagram that shows each of those gaps in the phase 1 area. This is where we would have some of the areas that are lower than the 4.5, particularly 2A over here close to the Maritime Welcome Center, but it's not much lower than 4.5. So that's just one small little gap right in here where you have some stairs. But looking forward, so the next couple of graphics I've got here talk about some sea level rise. This is sort of the history of sea level rise in Annapolis over about a century or so. And you can see that, when I'm talking about something we would have to deploy maybe once a decade. We would anticipate that changing by 2060 to being probably an annual deployment. Another sea level rise graphic here. This one is forward-looking, courtesy of primarily Alex Davies, but a team of folks. Alex is a meteorologist or a professor at the Oceanography and Meteorology Department over at the Naval Academy. And so these are projections moving forward. Rule of thumb that I use is 5 inches per decade. So fast forward 30 years, the tides are going to be 15 inches higher than they are today. And the last question is, what is the cost difference? What would it cost to kind of revert to that original design? Assuming we were having this discussion a year ago, or when it would be possible. Now it's not really possible because the project is under construction. That would be a $10 million kind of, maybe on the low end, is that estimate.
No problem. Let me just pull out my wallet.
Right.
Do you have anything else?
No, that was it. That's the 6 questions, but I've got lots of.
Thank you.
You're right. I expect a little bit of follow on, and I've got various reference materials to.
Any questions, comments from the committee? Nothing? No, thank you, Director. So yeah, it was very helpful to hear all this and to have our earlier conversation. I thought it was interesting. I didn't realize the settlement of some of the material, potential settlement, really is driving, at least somewhat, the change in the barrier. And let's see, you mentioned the installation. As far as planning for that 2060 scenario, you said that would be you expect, based on some of the projections, that'd be an annual occurrence, or we would have to install the complete barrier once a year?
Yes.
At least? Okay. Yeah, that's way past, I think, our time probably with the city. But I suppose that's something they would need to start planning for 2050 or so. Right. Right.
At which point in time, certainly the existing bulkhead would be nearing the end of its useful life. So there will be opportunities to do something that's less labor intensive then. Yeah.
Okay.
This point about sediment, would you mind just talking about that a little bit more? I mean, the way you described it makes sense, but could you kind of go into some more detail? Do you mind?
Sure. Without getting, I'm not a geotech person, but essentially what we have is a fairly substantial layer of unconsolidated sediments, 30 or 50 feet below ground. And what has happened is that there's never been a heavy load set on top of them before. And so what's going to happen is when we bring in and we elevate our park, that's going to create more weight. And if you just imagine stepping on a sponge, it's going to squeeze it. And this is in an area very near Craig Street. So what we've been calling the active park, I'll go back to my map, let you know what we're talking about. It's really right in this area. And so it's sort of an oval-shaped deposit of sediments. And what's going to happen is that's going to compress over 50 years. A lot of that consolidation will happen in the first 3 to 5, and things will sink and become uneven. So there will be a maintenance requirement throughout this project to sort of adjust bricks. Maybe bricks will be removed, and we'll be adding sand and things of that nature. But it's going to have a little bit of a funny look to it. Just being fully transparent, the walls will move a little bit. And that all that hardscaping will start to take on slopes that something that will start as flat will become sloped.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then how does that tie into the choice to use these manually deployable barriers rather than?
All right, so I'll use a visual aid here.
Please.
So yours. When we would build this thing, a flip-up barrier or a rise-up barrier would sit between two things. Mm-hmm. Everything has to fit absolutely perfect.
I think I'm getting where
to
you're
the
going.
millimeter, right?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, this screen shifts this way,
Yeah.
or this way, or this way. And I fit on one side, but I no longer fit over here. We engineered, how would we shim this up? How would we adjust those interfaces between the movable barrier and the thing it's supposed to sit up against? We were like, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. Much better to have a manually deployed barrier that could be reconfigured. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a perfect square, or we could adjust. They're just a much more mechanically simple thing, and so you can the mounting things can just be unbolted and bolt some new mounts in, so everything still works.
Makes total sense. I'm glad I asked the question because I thought we were talking about like sediment clogging the barrier.
No,
So
it's
this
just
makes so
making
much
things.
more
It's
sense.
geometry, basically.
Yeah.
The puzzle pieces would no longer fit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm oversimplifying, but it's kind of like being able to shave down a door as the house settles.
It's exactly like having a door in your house where that door jamb is not square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
And I think last comment on my part would just be, I felt quite assured after our separate conversation, because I was asking the director about some of, basically I think something for the public to understand. As we build out the entire planned barrier, it's going to be in phases, right? But we do have planned scenarios of how do we actually protect the entirety of City
Right.
Dock
Right.
in the middle of these phases being complete, somewhat complete, partially complete. We have options given this technology and other technology that we picked up from.
And you made a great point for everybody who obviously wasn't part of that conversation. It was just a phone call last week. If we don't have what we call south compromise, this area completely protected, and we were going to get backdoor flooding from off the screen past, let's say, the waterfront hotel were to flood, and potentially that water would flow to the north up here towards Memorial Circle. We could, during an event like that, completely close Compromise Street and put a flood barrier across Compromise Street. In that, if we were to get a major hurricane during that 1 or 2 year period where we had all of this great stuff is in place, what do we do if there's still a vulnerability over here? Great suggestion, just close Compromise Street and put up a barrier, leave it in place for a couple of days. That's obviously inconvenient to have Compromise Street closed for that long, but it would be better than letting downtown flood at the cost of $5 or $10 million.
On something I just thought of when you were talking about that, I think that's even more reason to go, at least have the capability to make Duke of Gloucester two-way when we need to make that shift.
It's another benefit, right? That project has, it's got some downsides, right?
Yeah.
But cost and loss of parking, but the ability to be able to handle any sort of a disruption to traffic flow, whether it could be a fire, it could be a lot of things. It's nice to be able to route traffic a different way. Right now, the only way to get through town is to come down Compromise Street.
Okay, I think that's it. I don't have anything else.
I'm just always so impressed at how well thought out this project is.
Yeah, absolutely.
At every scenario.
You know, y'all only see a few people here, right? There's an army of engineers behind the scenes doing a lot of work.
Yeah. It was been. I have absolutely agree. I've been impressed with how
Thank you.
much we've thought ahead on this. So thank you very much for taking the time today.
My pleasure.
And keep us posted if anything changes. All right. Next up, I think Acting City Manager Buckland came just in time. We can.
I'm glad we could pull you away from watching movies. I know you don't have anything else to do.
So I did want to jump to some legislation. We have R 121, which is the performance standards for fiscal year 27. And I saw that a couple departments did update their standards. I didn't look at all of them, but I did see Office of Law did, and they look good to me. I know Deputy City Manager Guile did as well, update for the sustainability. Is there anything else you want to highlight in the update, at least pertaining to the environment? We don't need to go too
Yeah, there
out
were
of our realm.
updates. Acting City Manager Vicki Buckland. There were updates from a number of different departments. Some of them were just a few things here and there. Transit updated a couple of things. Central Services updated more. Jackie did a lot. There are a few in planning and zoning. But correct, not everyone made changes, but there were a few.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the changes Jackie made were probably the most extensive.
Yeah, and so I guess we could start there with the changes that were made in Ms. Guild's section, most pertinent to the environment. So does anybody have any questions or comments on any of the changes that she made?
I have an overarching question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why is it that these were referred specifically to environmental matters? I think that was, as I remember, it was actually like a city code requirement that they come here. Why this? No?
Oh, no, it's because I made the referral because years ago, the committee did ask for updates, and I recalled specifically because I know Deputy City Manager Guile in a previous capacity had changed them, but they didn't get carried over. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to try to get those back in there. And so, yeah, it was because I asked it to be referred to us.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, are there specific questions for Ms. Guile? Yeah, I thought they were great. I don't have any comments either.
Yeah, I just made them to better reflect the actual work that's being done now.
Yeah.
Things have changed quite a bit since the days of DNEP, and even the Office of
Yeah.
Environmental Policy. So that's why I made those.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to do that. So the other issue is just I did put together some amendments to propose as far as additional standards particularly for planning and zoning. If you look at the handout, and I apologize, these are not posted at the moment just because it didn't occur to me till earlier today that we had to add this to the agenda. It was postponed last meeting, and we just forgot to add it. So I didn't want to hold up the legislation. So in any case, I had changes to 3 departments on, just from the environmental lens, I know there's a larger goal from City Manager's office to beef up the performance standards in the future. But personally, I just wanted to see if there are things we could do in the interim to make some improvements now. And so the question I would offer to the committee and the city manager is these are proposals again, and just to summarize, planning and zoning, I tried to beef up things dealing with urban tree canopy program, Forest Conservation Program, as well as critical area. Public Works, I tried to add some dealing with stormwater BMP, maintenance and inspections, erosion sediment control, illicit discharge detection and elimination, MS4 program, and then for Department of Transportation, some metrics as far as the cycling program. And so, again, I know you're just seeing these. I am completely fine if yourself or the committee would prefer these be postponed, if you think that we should get some department feedback, or if you have other comments, concerns, or if the board, the committee has other concerns. So is there anything immediately from the committee or the city manager?
I'll tell you where I am on these, Alderman Savage. I think we really need to update our process for developing these performance measures, and until we have a much better process, I think they're overall, unfortunately, not super meaningful. All that said, I also don't really want to add 11 or 12 performance measures, maybe 13 performance measures to planning and zoning when they have 6 right now. So the compromise I'd offer is, if you want to pick one of these that you think is most important for each department, I'd be willing to support them. But otherwise, I think I'm going to oppose this amendment.
Are there any other thoughts from the committee? City manager?
This is certainly an area where I have some interest in making changes each year. And certainly the new administration, I think, has some intentions for this next year as well, to make changes. Generally speaking, I'd like to have the buy-in of the department directors who are subject to these, so I would want to float these by them. As noted, there's a lot that's added here, and so I would definitely want their buy-in. Otherwise, my fear is then that they're not meaningfully collected, acted upon. You know, it's the beginning to end that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of. So.
Yeah, I understand. Alderman Huntley?
I'll say, I think I've done a lot of thinking about what our performance measures should look like. And I've talked some with the city manager about that at times. And I think 2 of the things that are most crucial to me are, one, that they be relatively easy to collect the data on, which I think actually most of these are, maybe 1 or 2, not so much. But especially on the transit ones, maybe not so much. But planning and zoning and public works, the data is mostly easy to collect. And then the other thing is, Alderman Thorpe and I love to talk about, and Alderman Arnett too, you've probably heard him talk about the difference between an output and an outcome. And a bunch of these strike me as more like outputs, like the number of enforcement actions for illegal tree removal. It's like, do we really want that to be high, or do we want it to be low? So I think like we can measure that, but I think we don't really want to grade people on it, because ultimately we want the answer to be 0, because nobody's illegally taking down trees, right? Yeah. So on that, I think these could use some work. But I commend you on mostly having these be really easy to measure.
So for the city manager, what's your larger comment as far as, I hear you on the department input, but what about, I guess, the question of making additional changes now? Because it seems like only a few departments took the opportunity to really overhaul. I'm not sure.
So normally I would have actually specifically worked with a few departments this year, which I did not do this year. So the departments were left more to their own devices, and some folks like Jackie took the advantage of the opportunity to really make changes, but not everyone did that. When I'm sort of more in my normal role, there will be fewer options. The other thing I'll say about this, and this has certainly been part of the conversation that I've had with Alderman Huntley and conversations definitely with Alderman Arnett in the past. The council's been engaging in this conversation around strategic planning and how do we define what's really important to us. And there should be some alignment between that larger vision and these. And in particular, I want to draw the distinction of the audience in some sense, the venue for these is what's included in the budget book, which is different from what we care about measuring overall for management purposes or other things. How do we tell the story of progress and the effort of the departments and how those align with what the city's trying to accomplish? And so I think the questions that you have here around interest in this variety of things, I don't think that's, I don't want to give the impression that we don't care about these things or care about measuring these things. I think the question is, do we want that to be the top line story that's part of the story of what are we trying to accomplish? And how does that align with the overall strategic plan as that expresses the interest and intentions of the council? I think that as that effort matures, these performance measures will then also mature. And so I think there's some ways in which those two efforts feed each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I see where you're going with that. And I will get back to that. I think, well, I guess I could just go in that direction. So I guess, because what I'm kind of leaning towards, because I do, well, first of all, is there any, I'm trying to think how to word this, where to start with it. The bigger question is timing. Like, in my head, do we, assuming the committee even wanted to do this, but would it be worth taking the time, say between this now and the next meeting, to get staff's feedback on these to at least beef up somewhat some of the environmental performance standards? Of course, that would beg the question of, do we have the time to delay that when the budget's getting introduced? Was it May? April 13th. So our next meeting sometime around then. But again, the timing might not be ideal because really the budget introduced should include these performance standards, right? So as I'm thinking out loud here, we probably don't have the time, I'm assuming, to really postpone to do some of the more additional work. If that's the case, well, first of all, do you agree that's?
Yeah, I think the timing is not working for you.
Yeah.
But that's also why I want to draw the distinction between what we include in the budget book and what we might want to talk about. To Alderman Huntley's point, part of the goal, certainly for me, of performance measures is that they should be easily collected. If they're onerous to collect, then we're much less likely to stay with that. I'd rather have a smaller set of performance measures that are reliable than a larger set that we only partially believe. And so I think the question of whether we want to have information on these topics that we can talk about, I think that's still essentially sort of fair game, whether they're included in the budget book or not, being a somewhat different question, right? So just even if, because of the timing, let's say we didn't end up banning any of these, that doesn't mean that we can't ever talk about these things or look at that data or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think if we really don't have the time, yeah, I don't want to just get these added without department input. Plus, I think that'd be an uphill battle. But the question would then, I guess, become for me, well, two, if there's anything we should pull out of here to include, and I think that Ms. Guile did a great job in including, I think, a lot of these anyway, at least some of the, like for tree canopy, that's included in the sustainability offices.
It's included, but one thing I did do was try to remove things that I'm not responsible for. Like, for instance, the tree canopy and a lot of the tree initiatives used to fall under my purview when I was the Director of Office of Environmental Policy, but
Yeah.
now the urban forester is in planning and zoning. So I can't be held to that standard because that's not my job. Like, I can work on some initiatives that are tree-related, education, et cetera, but a lot of the things I used to have under my performance standards, because I had the urban tree forester with me, I had to take out.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll ask Ms. Jackson, maybe we add this to an agenda down the road to work on some of these. Because I do think, that's kind of my question to you, Ms. Buckland, would be what are the next steps for this process? I know it may be somewhat contingent, obviously, on when we get a city manager hired. But in your mind, because I know you've been doing a lot of work on these in the past and currently, so what do you think? What's the next step? Should we schedule something for, I don't know, half a year out where we, get maybe say, hey, here are departments, here's some ideas from the committee. Take a look at these, get us a proposal, we can have a discussion. Or is that something you're going to, or somebody else in the office, work on and get us some drafts for
Yeah.
performance standards ahead of time?
Yeah, so the departments that I would normally have worked with this year, there are 4 departments in particular that I haven't worked with at all. What's here is mostly legacy stuff for them, is the Office of Law, HR, Transportation, and Fire. So when I had a little bit more of my time back, those are the departments I'll target first, because we haven't talked about those at all. For departments where, like you have an obvious interest in particular parts of this, I think it's fair game to have a conversation about them. None of those are transportations on my list that I would have worked with anyway, because I haven't talked with them at all. But the other 2 wouldn't normally have been on my list to specifically talk with, but knowing your interest, then let's talk about it. And so normally I would have done some of that work over the summer after the budget was passed, and then into the very early fall, which is still probably the timeline that I would want to work toward.
Okay. Because I certainly, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I think I've had conversations with the Alderman Huntley about this bigger picture before. I see these performance standards as really being a key way to make sure that policies are getting and programs are getting implemented, right? Because just take, for example, and I know I see it as environmental, but it is a large transportation as well, but the cycling component as an example, right? We had a 2011 plan that was adopted, and then the person who put it together left the city. We had 2 director changes in the interim. That plan fell by the wayside. There were supposed to be annual updates, annual meetings with this cycling work group, and it fell off everybody's radar. But if we had some of the deliverables, such as just for sake of example, linear feet of bike lane installed or whatever, maintained, or kind of metrics that we keep track of, I feel like that would really help us make sure these programs are perpetuated, right, and continue. Because it's just one example of things that I feel like often just we just don't oftentimes, I feel like, know what the priorities are of the departments. It changes from year to year, whoever's in the position. But and again, I don't want to belabor this point.
Yeah, I completely, you're looking at me like you want my feedback. I totally agree with you. I think it is, this is, in a perfect world, this is one of the most important pieces of legislation that we pass every year. I think we recognize that we're not quite in that world yet, and we should strive towards it. But for now, I'm happy with the work that we have done, that Ms. Buckland has done, really, to get a bunch of these much better than they ever were before, and recognize that we're not going to solve the other ones today or tomorrow or the next day.
I think from my perspective, it's also important to just recognize that these should be sort of living, right? That we're going to start somewhere, and if that doesn't illuminate information that's actionable, of interest, then we need to make changes. Or it's not telling us what we thought it was telling us, or we find out that it's not reliable. I don't think any of the measures that are here, that there's anything sacred about them. They should adapt over time. And so I don't, the idea that there are misses in here and there are things that aren't really framed the way that council's interested in, that doesn't fuss me at all. Like, let's make changes then, right? Let's work over time to get that framed in ways that align with the strategic vision of the council, help us illuminate the work that we're doing or should be doing, and give us some basis for making adjustments along the way. And so the idea that we'll need to make changes over time, yep, we definitely will. And let's do that.
Okay, so if we were to circle back, if the committee were to circle back with you or whoever on some of these standards, when should we, for next year, when should we do that? You said, I think, the fall?
Yeah, so given the August recess, if you wanted to just start right away in September, that would make sense to me.
Okay. All right, if we get a placeholder for that, and then just hearing the committee, it sounds, and even myself, it sounds like we don't have time to move forward with some of these. I mean, but personally, I'm still a little frustrated just because I'm not very happy with the standards that we're going to be putting into next year's budget. I understand why and the time constraint we're under. I guess we'll just have to deal with it. We've dealt with it in the past. Okay, anything else from the committee? So I guess we would make a motion. Do we want to make a motion to recommend or no action? I'd probably just prefer no action, but.
Yeah, I'm fine with no action.
All right, so
Yeah.
no action.
Yeah.
I don't think that needs to be a motion, right? Okay, is there a motion then? A motion for no action?
All right, so moved.
For a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All
Thanks for coming to talk
Thank you,
about
Ms.
this.
Buckland. And let's see, we have, I guess, so is Public Works prepared for a presentation? Good? Okay. I guess we can, if you would join us up front, we'll start with ID 626, Stormwater Fee Incentive Rebate Program. Is this an updated presentation, different from the last time? All right, if you could introduce yourself for the record, and this is part 2 for the presentation on stormwater. Last time you spoke about the commercial. fee, right?
Yeah. So Mike Rosberg, Stormwater Program Manager, Public Works. Yes, it's an updated presentation that is a continuation from the last presentation. And part of the update is what we talked about last time and what we're talking about this time.
Ann Roederer, Stormwater Engineer, Department of Public Works. Okay. Also, just thank you for your flexibility with my schedule today.
Welcome.
Okay, so as you mentioned, this is part 2. So part 1, last time we met, we walked through just sort of a background on water quality and stormwater regulations and how the municipal separate storm sewer system, otherwise known as MS4 program, operates, and how the City of Annapolis Stormwater Group functions with that permit. We also talked generally about the stormwater utility fee that supports that MS4 program, and looked at some basic benchmarks for regional, how that fee fits into the region. So all of those slides are still here. So I'm just going to flip through them. We did talk a bit about non-residential last time, but we didn't quite finish the conversation because we wanted to talk about the credit program, or what I'm now calling the fee reduction program. So I'm going to go through this faster because you've heard it already, but you can always go back and watch the YouTube. What's that?
Oh, no, never mind.
Go ahead.
No, I see you. I was going to ask something, but I saw you addressing it in a couple slides.
Okay. You can always go back and watch the YouTube from May 8th, 2025. At 1 hour and 48 minutes, there's a detailed conversation about the non-residential rate structure and the fee reduction program. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fee reduction program today because we do have some developments. So just as a refresher, the proposal on the table relative to the non-residential stormwater utility fee is to change the fee structure for non-residential ratepayers from a tiered structure to an equivalent residential unit basis, which we call an ERU, using measured impervious area. The goal of making this structural shift is to more accurately reflect existing impervious conditions and stormwater practices on site, to provide a more uniform building approach. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more in a second, and to just generally raise awareness and incentivize stormwater management for larger properties in particular. I got rid of the word equitable in this in these points, because I'm sure you've seen this slide before, because this is really intended to address the conditions on the ground. It's not actually intended to lift up anyone who has greater need. It's really mostly about the larger properties and making sure that they're paying their share into their contribution, their use of the system. So as it stands right now, the residential fee structure is a tiered structure. The proposal is, again, this ERU basis. So just to clarify, an equivalent residential unit, an ERU, is really it's a billing unit. It's a typical billing unit used in stormwater, and it's kind of, I keep this definition on the bottom of every slide because I don't know why it's unnecessarily confusing, but it is unnecessarily confusing. So the idea is that it's a billing unit that reflects the median impervious area of a single family detached house or detached residential property. And so in the city of Annapolis, we've established that to be 2,100 square feet. And again, that'll just show up on the bottom of the slide. So when you get confused, you can look back at that. So if we look at this change, you can see right now for non-residential, this is looking at if a large property, the impact of the fee for a large property. So right now, Annapolis, the rate would be down towards the bottom of some of our local fees in other municipalities. But this change would increase that contribution from large property owners fairly significantly. Very quickly, not going through the details of this because we did it last time, that means that if we look at the existing structure, a 21,000 square foot property or 21,000 square foot impervious area property owner would fall into the second tier and they'd pay $170.86 per quarter. If we change the structure, they would then, that would be equivalent, the 21,000 square feet would be equivalent to 10 ERUs, and the rate would actually, their fee would actually triple. So that's a pretty significant difference. And those property owners with more impervious area would pay more to fund the system. And it would not be limited by the cap of Tier 4. So those large property owners would see the highest increases in overall fees and are most likely to be incentivized to implement or expand their stormwater management practices. On the flip side, many nonprofits and religious institutes, or it's not really on the flip side, but keeping in mind many nonprofits and religious institutions might have limited capital to support that sort of expansion or improvement of their stormwater management. And that's where we're going to start to talk about making this not only more consistent, but also more equitable. We took a look just quickly at if we're keeping the residential structure the same for the point of this conversation, just for the moment, the revenue impact of making this fee structure change, and it's about 26% increase in revenue, largely, again, coming from those larger property owners. And then if you look at the spread of that impact on the different ratepayers, you can see that the majority of ratepayers will actually not see much of an increase. They fall in that $0 to $200 per quarter rate increase. But those 11 properties over to the right wouldn't see an increase of over $2,000 or up to $2,000, sorry, over $2,000 in their quarterly fees. So that's pretty substantial.
And do you have, do you know which, are those typically the ones that I'm assuming have more ERUs, higher number of ERUs? So essentially those with greater impervious surface to begin with, or is there a particular tier where you're seeing a greater increase than the others?
No, so within each tier, anyone that's currently at the top of the tier is in theory paying less than they should be paying, and the people at the bottom of the tier are paying more than they should be paying. So it does shake out in each tier, but those ones there in the 11 group, those are the largest property owners. Okay. Or the largest properties owner with the largest amount of impervious area. Potentially somebody could be a largest property owner with all pervious. Yes.
Do you mind if we take questions as you go? Because I know there's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, this is very heartening. I love the way this chart looks. When we talk about $0 to $200, sorry if this is a silly question, but
No.
How much of an increase does that represent percentage-wise? Is that like, are the people in that category, are they typically paying $2,000 a year, or are they typically paying $200 a year, in which case 200 is a big jump? Just very roughly.
Right. So they're falling in one of the 4 existing tiers right now.
Yeah.
And so there's a set amount within each. So $200 could be 100% of what you're paying, but it's most likely not. It's going to be usually more like 20 to 30%. But it really all depends on where you fall in that existing tier. And so it's kind of random. And that's sort of the point of making the change, is where you fall in that existing tier and is kind of random. right? So if we normalize it, we can be a little bit more accurate about how it's actually reflecting what's on the ground. And I know that didn't exactly answer your question because I can't give you a hard number right off the top of my head, but I can try.
Yeah, that's
to go
totally
back.
fine, and I don't expect it right now. The way I'd like to be able to phrase this, and I'm hoping maybe you can help me plug in the numbers on it. The way I'd like to be able to phrase this is 90% of people will see either a decrease or an increase of no more than 10%, 20%, 50%, whatever that number is.
Well, keep in mind,
Right.
these are non-residential too.
Right.
This is
I
just,
hear-
yeah, so this is
Yeah,
not
sorry, I
residential.
shouldn't-
So we could do that pretty easily with the math. I can't do it in my head right here,
Yeah,
but
yeah, like I
700
said.
versus 77. So, yeah, so that's 90% approximately.
Yeah.
Slightly less than 90%.
No, yeah, it's 90%. I did that math. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out the number I don't have is
Right.
is this a
Right.
10% increase or a 100% increase?
And the point is it varies for each one. And
Gotcha.
that's the tricky part. And that's why I took out the word equitable for just this change, because some people will see increases and
Right.
some people will see decreases. And it doesn't mean that you might see an increase even if you're a very small property owner, right? Depending on where you fall in the tier.
Yes, okay. Now I'm getting what you're saying. Thank you so much.
And then just trying to look at the impacts of the rate on different property uses. This is not granular, and it's only looking at the net change, but we can see that basically commercial, which is that other business category, the green row, will see the highest increase overall in fees. Again, there are some of those properties that will actually see their fees go down. Then we see that churches and see the biggest decrease, but we have a very clear example, and we're working with the Heritage Baptist Church on this credit program that I'm going to talk about next, because their fees will go up. Again, just because of where they happen to fall in that tier right now, which isn't about what they're doing to manage stormwater, it's about the tiers that we've established. So in order to provide that more equitable approach, we are also proposing that we concurrently roll out an expanded non-residential fee reduction program with basically the same goals of incentivizing opportunity to maintain or improve practices, but also to limit new financial hardship for non-commercial and non-residential taxpayers, i.e. the churches and the nonprofits, for that more equitable approach. And we're also hoping that this program will allow us to leverage those community partners' activities because they're out there in the community on the ground. So we have initiatives around outreach and public education and participation that we can take advantage of these community partners to work together on that. So just to back up 1 second, right now we do have a stormwater fee reduction program. It is quite underutilized, but it does exist. And it basically reflects what was required or what was permitted in the 2007 Stormwater Act, which is, it allows up to a 50% reduction of the stormwater fee for stormwater management practices on your site. And we have an application, there's submittal requirements, they're listed up here. Basically, it's fairly technical. The practice needs to meet the standards that the state has published, and we need to set up a maintenance agreement to confirm that the property owner will continue to maintain the practice so that we can continue to claim credit for it in our MS4 program. And we do a site visit to verify that their practice is what they say it is and that it's functioning as it should be.
Question about some of the stop me if you're going to get into this, but some of the allowable measures to get this fee reduction, sounds like, so is it a requirement on the state enabling whatever the statute is, that does that enable a credit program and then put these requirements on there as far as how you can get the credit to the local stormwater fee?
It enables the credit program, and it sets a limit on how much reduction you can give them.
But does it say how you put metrics on or requirements on how you give that?
No, and
Okay.
different municipalities do it different ways.
Because what I'm getting at is, and I think you do get into this too, but allowing, for example, people to convert their parking into vegetated, put a
Well, okay,
tree,
so-
put a, some.
Yeah,
you
the
can also couple that with
practices are
stormwater.
documented in the Maryland Stormwater Design Standards Manual.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the approved state practices. So those need to, anything that gets, that's eligible for this program would need to be an improved state practice.
But it sounds like we're not limited to that if we,
There are a lot. I mean, it's
Yeah,
pretty
okay.
big, right?
okay.
It includes not just your sort of standard rain gardens and detention pools, but impervious removal, all sorts of alternative practices. I'm sure you're familiar with the standards, but you want to say something more? Okay. Okay, so that is what we have existing. Currently, we have 8 non-residential ratepayers that take advantage of this program, which is pretty small. And so we're hoping that this change in rate structure, which will have an impact, a significant impact on some ratepayers, will allow for that, will kind of incentivize them to look more closely at this program. That said, we also want to ramp it up a bit. But this is an example of just looking at the calculation, and I'm going to try to go kind of fast with this, but of how that reduction would happen. So step 1, you calculate the percentage fee reduction. So this is an example of adding a stormwater pond, and it says the maximum allowable credit is 50% for this practice, and 60% of the total impervious area is directed to that practice. So you get to take 50% of 60%, which is 30%. So your fee goes down from the 345 that we saw earlier, 345.30 to 241.71. And, oh, this is black. It's very black. It does not look like that on my computer. When we look at this, if we looked at all the properties that we are aware of that have approved practices in the city right now, if everyone came and applied and was accepted to this program, it would have this impact on the revenue. So it would have, we would increase the structure, we would change the structure and increase revenue, and then we would increase the fee reductions, and it would bring it back down a little bit, but not down further than where we are right now. So we are also wondering if there are opportunities to, again, help those other ratepayers, particularly the churches and nonprofits, people with limited capital, to increase their opportunities for fee reductions beyond that practice-based fee. So when we're looking at that, we want to consider who might be eligible to receive additional reductions, what type of properties and use of properties, and whether we want to just have a hardship waiver and exemption for certain property types, what qualifying activities, what activities would qualify for additional fee reductions beyond that practice-based reduction, and even in the practice base, if there are any changes that need to happen there, and if there's a threshold for qualifications. And then finally, what level of reduction can they get? Again, there's the 50% mandate, but can we give them additional reductions for non-practice related activities? So we took a look at several different municipalities and their programs. These are some of them, not all. And not just fee reduction programs, but various incentive programs. And the county is always our first go-to. And the county, we work with the county on a watershed restoration grant program, so we are jointly funding restoration projects through that program. The county also has property use exemptions in their fee structure. They give tax credits, and they also have this DNR Clean Marina program. Baltimore City has so many different loopholes and craziness. There's a decision tree that is just nauseating to look at. So they have many, many use carve-outs, including carve-outs for the discharge permit holders, NIPD's permit holders, for harbor discharges, for religious, for K through 12, for small green and limited development spaces. There's just a whole bunch of different exceptions and ways to go. Prince George's County has an alternative compliance path, which is something that we were interested in, and we'll talk about more. They also have a rebate program for their residential ratepayers, which has had some success, but is actually currently paused because they've run out of money. So that's also kind of a red flag. And then we looked at some other programs, and there are lots of different options. When you get to bigger cities like Philadelphia or New York or DC, they're actually buying practices on private properties to claim them, which is what you start to do when you get desperate with your MS4 program, but we might get there someday. And then Alexandria is an interesting one, and one we looked at a lot. They have, in addition to practices, they have conservation landscaping practices as acceptable ways to go, and some other ways that we'll look at a little bit more. So looking at all that, what we are proposing for this program is that all types of properties, so both residential and non-residential, will continue to have this option for a practice-based fee reduction. Again, limited to 50%. And then for non-residential, we're proposing an alternative compliance path where they can get an additional reduction, or they could not get practice-based reductions at all, and they could just go on this path up to another 50%. So in theory, you could get 100% fee reduction. You'd have to be treating 100% of your impervious area, which is hard, and you'd have to do all the other bits, but in theory, it's possible. And so we're proposing that this alternative compliance path would be for tax-exempt religious or other 501c nonprofits for that alternative compliance, and potentially also just a hardship waiver. So qualifying activities would be those state-approved on-site practices. The threshold for that would be new or redevelopment or retrofit would meet the existing guidelines, and they'd have to pass our inspections that we have to do every 3 years. And then for activities-based qualifying activities, we include options for outreach and education, green care, and good housekeeping, and we'll look at those a little bit more. Credit programs typically evolve over time, and this proposal is trying to keep it pretty simple. It doesn't seem like it by looking at the slide, but it really is. But there are other interesting things that we've seen, like that Green Marina program, that I think would be interesting to introduce in the future, to look at potentially including. And then
Which program?
the Green Marina one that the county does. Or looking at easements and purchasing practices or zoning allowances. You know, there's always more options. Well, maybe not always, but for a while there's more options. But we're trying to keep it simple to start. So So the level of fee reduction would be that maximum 50% for practices and/or the 50% for the alternative compliance, and then potentially 100% hardship waiver. That would be 1 year renewable. So this goes into the kind of details of the application for that alternative compliance path. So it gives you kind of a look of what we're proposing. So the alternative compliance path has a outreach and education component and a green care and good housekeeping component. Again, trying to leverage these institutions' position in the community to expand outreach and public knowledge about stormwater management by hosting campaigns or cleanup events or stormwater management practice renewal events, different things like that. And then the second piece, the green care and good housekeeping, really is touching on lawn management, pesticides, housekeeping practices, conservation landscaping, and mature tree preservation, as well as tree planting. And these are the details of that, and I'm not going to go through them right now, but they're there. So just to give an example of that, if we had our previous large property owner with the 21,000 square feet of impervious area, we previously established that they could get the 50% of the 60%, which is 30%, for their practices. If they were able to apply and participate in this alternative compliance path, they could get additional 25% for outreach education and another 25% reduction for the green housekeeping and landscape practices. And so that would be 30 plus 25 plus 25 is 80%. And so their fee could come all the way down to $69 per quarter. So that's that.
Well, are there any thoughts or comments on the commercial before we move on to, the non-residential before we move on to residential? Alderman?
Just one thing, I'm a little concerned about the hardship waiver, that I won't pretend to know every specific here, but certainly I have seen other environmental programs where there's a significant cost of compliance and everybody spends a bunch of money to show that they don't have the money to spend even more money to do the environmental compliance. I'm thinking back to some work I did with municipalities in Iowa a while ago. And I'm just concerned at how we make sure we don't have tons of people applying for that hardship waiver and losing out on significant revenue, and also, more importantly, not have our creeks get cleaned. So have you guys thought about that much?
Yeah, I agree with you. I have some hesitancy around the hardship waiver, and I think it maybe is something we could just try to pilot for the first year and not implement full force. We've worked mostly on the fee reduction program, and we are piloting that right now with the Heritage Baptist Church, trying to work through the details. For the hardship waiver, we have been working on a hardship waiver sort of thing for our stormwater, what do we call that? Stormwater practice maintenance grant program. And so we do have some background information that we can use, but I don't think it would be something that we would be pushing hard. That said, not everyone has, some people don't have a lot of capital, but they have cultural capital or community capital. Some people just don't have any of that. But I don't think it would come up too much, to be honest with you. And when we looked at that spread of who's impacted and how they're impacted, it's really those large property owners that already are used to paying money as the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
So I don't think they'll be attempting to claim hardship waivers. I also do maybe give people too much benefit of the doubt, but
No, I mean, not to say there aren't, like, again, using that example that I'm thinking of is Iowa wastewater treatment plants not upgrading because they really are short on count. And we're talking about towns of 300 people sometimes. And yet what ends up happening is they spend $50,000 on a study to prove they can't make the $100,000 worth of repairs. And then the water keeps getting dirty. Although, anyway, I could go on about Iowa water quality. Not really the point. I think what you're saying is very reasonable, and we just iterate on it, and we keep an eye on what percentage is of people are seeking these hardship waivers.
yeah. But certainly if it's a big obstacle, we just take it out.
Yeah, and I'm also not a huge proponent of property exemptions, just blanket, because I think the county does exempt religious institutions. I personally don't like that idea because, well, one, they're already tax exempt, but two, they have a lot of impervious surface. And
Right.
I think I think the point is a lot of the measures that are allowed are pretty cheap to do. If they, for example, removing some parking spots and putting in some permeable, you could put grass pave, because a lot of these church lots are only used for very brief periods. So they could certainly get away with grass pave or converting them to tree wells of some kind. Because I'm
Right,
sure,
and we're also trying to give them these other options,
Yeah.
outreach and engagement and landscaping options, because anything that involves construction is surprisingly expensive.
well, and that's
but-
what we need to change too, I think, because they really shouldn't have to get permits if they want to do some of the easy things on here. Like, I mean, yes, we want them to do obviously miss utility, make sure there's nothing, but if they want to take out some parking spaces and put in some trees, let's make that as easy as we can.
Right.
Let's get an
and so-
exempted.
Yeah, so we have the tree
expedited
planting
process or
part
something
in
like
the alternative compliance, so that you can cover that without
Yeah.
the maintenance agreement and the standard and the practice, state-approved practice. So agreed. Yeah, definitely not proposing exemptions. If there was a hardship waiver, it would be for the church and nonprofit, and they would not be able to accomplish the alternative compliance path. I mean, it would be true hardship, right?
And it only lasts for, I think I saw 1 or 2 years.
1 year for the hardship, yeah.
Okay, so on to,
But it's renewable.
So on to
Residential.
residential. So the other thing that we were asked to look at was to evaluate changing the stormwater fee structure for the residential ratepayers, which is currently a flat fee. There's one fee for single-family residences, and then there's a half fee for multifamily units. So changing that from either from the flat fee to an equivalent residential unit basis, which is what we just looked at for the non-residential, or switching it to a tiered basis, which is what we currently have for the non-residential. Again, same goals, to more accurately reflect the existing impervious conditions, for a more equitable billing approach, and to raise awareness and incentivize management. And there's that definition of an ERU at the bottom of the screen for you, just in case. So here's our current structures, that flat fee showing up there. The one billing unit is the $34.53 for quarterly fee. And if you have a unit in a multifamily situation, then you're paying that half of that. Which, yeah, if you think about hard, is hard to understand, but it is not uncommon.
well, I just want to point out, I think it's worth emphasizing that on the flat fee, which is the current, that somebody who has a 1,500 foot, whatever it is, townhome is paying the same fee as somebody who has a 5,000 square foot house.
Yes,
on
as somebody who has a
Spa Creek.
1,050 square foot townhome, I am very aware of that.
And so that's where you get into
But we'll look at that a little more, at the spread of that. So the options that we talked about are either the ERU basis, which we just reviewed that structure, or going to tiered, which is maybe a kind of a interim step. If we take a look at the existing residential properties that we have in the city, you can see that they do largely fall around that purple line. That's our ERU line, our 2,100 square feet. And so if we were to change this to the ERU structure, any of the properties above that line would be paying more, and any of the properties below that line would be paying less. And any of the properties on the line would stay the same. If we changed it to tiered, which I put some proposed potential tiers in there, you definitely still have greater density towards the bottom. Those giant properties that you were mentioning, there are some, but there aren't that many.
So you said everybody to the left of that purple line basically is paying too much right now. Well, relatively, right? Based on their actual impervious surface, they're
yes.
paying a lot more than,
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, that's a kind of a gross overstatement, but yes.
Politicians are good at gross overstatements.
I didn't mean that in any sort of negative way. I'm sorry. Okay. So we have some examples from other municipalities. Arlington does the number of ERUs, the ERU-based structure for residential, and Baltimore City has tiers. They have 3 tiers. Just to see where we fall within that range of other municipalities in the region, our current structure, our current rate is actually up there. So if we're changing that rate and we're reducing it for a lot of people, that's great. If we're increasing it for some people, it will be even more up there. So here's an example of a small property if we made the change, looking at both options. So a small property is currently paying that flat fee, $34.53. If we change their 1,010 square feet to an ERU-based fee, that would be 1 ERU. So they would then pay whatever that ERU number is, which is $34.53, ironically. So they would not change. If we change it to a tiered structure, they would fall into that first tier, and so they would pay less. If we look at a large property, if we change that is currently paying that flat fee, if we change it to the ERU basis, suddenly they'd be paying for 2 ERUs, so their fee would triple. And if that's not right, their fee would double. Anyway, their fee would double.
Right, yeah,
Or-
so it would double.
It would double.
Okay, cool. Thank
It
you.
says
I was
triple,
confused.
but it meant to say double. But it would triple if we move to the tiered, where they would fall into tier 4, and that number would go up. So if we were to make this change, there is a significant amount of administrative lift that would need to occur. The non-residential properties, we have 880 some odd non-residential properties. Residential properties, we have 11,000 plus residential properties. We would need to do the work that we've done for the non-residential program to get us to the point we're at in terms of looking at whether we need to do code updates, getting a website set up, doing outreach. We would also need to significantly revamp the billing process, because right now they're not being charged based on any kind of impervious area. They're just getting a flat fee. So that's adding an extra layer of data that we don't have collected or validated or understood in terms of the billing process. And that data would require ongoing management and maintenance and transfer to billing every year. The biggest bit, I think, with this potential change is the appeals process, which is something that already exists. It's required to exist, and it's in the city code. I believe, again, if we go back to my townhouse and my bill, if I got a bill that was radically different or even slightly different, I would take a hard look at it, and if I didn't agree with what they said, I would appeal it instantaneously. So when we're talking about 11,000 properties, that's a lot of potential appeals. So we want to be sure that we are presenting the information to them through some sort of tool that, like an online viewer or something through GIS, and we have examples of those, which would take some effort to get in place. And at this point, we're still a bit concerned about the integrity of the data and whether we could back it up. That said, all of these structures have wiggle room. So if you're in a tier, you're getting charged based on, a range of impervious area. So that's your margin of error, right? And if you're getting charged based on an ERU, you're getting charged based on that base unit, that billing unit. So that 2,100 square feet, again, is your margin of error. So that's those can be pretty good margins of error, but when you start to get to the bigger property owners is where it could get fussy, or if they're falling on the edge of a tier, they could be battling that they should be in the other tier. So that's one major concern we have. Those are two major concerns we have: the data validation for a much larger data set, and the administrative lift of handling appeals.
Sorry if you mentioned this, I had to step out, but so for the ERU, that you have that listed as 2,100 feet. The tier structure is, I'd have to do the math on this, but it's
I'll go back to it.
1,400 or so in between each tier. But what would, and are you gonna, maybe you'll get into this, like what, is there a benefit to doing it based on ERU or based on tier?
Yeah.
And
So
how do you actually charge the ERU? Is it a one-on-one when somebody gets their bill? Or do you get go into a decimal?
no, it
point?
gets rounded.
It gets rounded.
That's why it's your margin of error. So really, that's kind of the big difference between them is whether you want your margin of error to be 2,100 square feet or half of 2,100 square feet, and whether. Well, I'll go to that slide.
Okay.
We can read my answer to your question. Okay.
But you're saying either way, there needs to be more work done.
Yes.
To get to.
Right. So potential barriers, we were kind of talking through the administrative requirement for the data validation, the appeals, the tracking, and the maintenance. I anticipate that would be a 1.5 FTE to manage overall and more at the startup. So the challenge there is supporting those additional costs is potentially going to offset any savings that a smaller property would see, because we would have to increase the overall rate by 10%. And then multi-unit properties are a sticky wicket. How to figure out how to charge them is a big task. Mm-hmm. Because none of them are the same, right? So potential benefits, so the measured structure could result in some savings for the smaller properties, which we saw in the example when you were gone, but you can go back and look at it. We saw in the smaller property for the, if we switch to the tiered, if we switch to the ERU, they actually stayed the same, but if we switch to the tiered, they saw a benefit or a reduction in their fee. Given the spread that we looked at of where the house sizes are, we think that has a limited equity impact. and may not really incentivize those property owners because really the cost of installing the practices is far exceeds the savings they might realize. And I did a back of the number return on investment calculation there. So you had asked if we switched to a tiered system, would that be easier? I think so the recording, the tracking, the administrative bit would be similar. But it could potentially reduce the number of appeals because it's a little less precise. So that would potentially reduce, I mean, that's speculation, but that is my speculation.
Well, oh, yeah, go ahead.
So this is just a kind of spitballing thing, but if we wanted to sort of phase this in, because one of the things I'm hearing from you is that the real limiting factor is appeals, and I think that's totally right. Is there a way that we could say, all right, we're keeping the structure for 90% of people, and we're keeping the current structure. But if you are in the top 10 highest percent, we're creating just a second tier that is those properties with the highest amount of impervious surface, and we'll expect them to pay some additional amount. Is that possible, or would it be too burdensome because we'd still have to figure out everybody's impervious surface to do that? Let me ask you,
Yeah.
does that address some of your concerns?
Yeah, so that's, if you kept the flat fee for everybody, but that upper tier, I don't know, is that a thing? I'm not sure, that's a possibility. I think if you do switch to tiered, then you do have to, again, the recording and tracking of the impervious area for everyone has to happen.
Well, it would essentially still be tiered, except there'd be only two
Just
tiers.
2 tiers, right.
Right.
So, yeah, and you'd still want to be able to go and see where you fall in that.
But I think the only people, under the proposed tier structure, the only people who would be appealing would be the medium to large properties. Because they're the ones who would see the fee increase.
It could be that, or they could be the people on the edges of the tiers, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm on the bottom
Yeah.
of tier 2, and I really think I should be in tier 1,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So here's my recommendation. Maintain the current fee structure for the residential properties at the moment. Because I don't think that the benefit really is equivalent to is enough for the lift. That is one step. Draft an amendment to revise the non-residential fee structure from tiered to ERU, because I think we have seen that there is a real benefit there, particularly when it's done concurrently with the upgraded fee reduction program. Oh, we're going to skip this for a second.
Are you going to propose moving forward with that? Is the administration going to move forward with that in the budget, as far as moving towards the non-residential?
So we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay. And well, on the residential, before we get to the other point, is do you have a chart like you did earlier for non-residential that show revenue?
No, we haven't done that analysis.
Okay. So I think that'd be important.
And so that falls into 4 and 5.
Okay.
So, so 4 is to develop that lookup tool, whether it's just a thing that spits out a number at you or whether it's GIS based and you can see your property for the non-residential. So that can support this new fee structure for the non-residential, but we can also do it as a test pilot to see if we want to do this for the residential, which again has a much larger scale, right? 800 properties versus 11,000 plus. So if we give it a shot with the non-residential, we can see how that goes and work towards the residential if we think if it makes sense. And then in the meantime, we can also continue to evaluate other incentive programs, including enhancements. My biggest recommendation would be looking at enhancements to the existing residential stormwater fee reduction program, focusing more on the carrot than the stick, basically, because I think that's where the bigger impact would be.
So on that, oh, you're going back to the
Sorry.
schedule.
You want to say that for a second?
Yeah, on that, I just wonder if you could work in something to Alderman Huntley's point. Because I like the idea of just, moving forward with the non-residential. And then you're talking about concurrently implementing, fee reduction program. But I'm just wondering if there is another step we could take, which would be to increase, because it's those large properties I'd really like to give them an incentive to take action, because they're really underpaying based on their actual impact. So.
Right, so, and that's where my proposal is to look closer at their fee reduction program, where I think we can really incentivize them. I don't know that this is the right tool, because the numbers that they will be paying more are not significant percentage-wise. I mean, if you are a large property owner, a large home property owner, the scale is still much smaller, so your increase in fee is not really going to be that much. So let's look at the incentive programs rather than the fee program.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my recommendation for now. And again, this is evolving,
Yeah.
and we can work on this fee lookup tool, the viewer, and see how that works for non-residential. If we feel like it works well, we can, we'll talk about how that needs to happen for residential. But for right now, we can definitely move forward with the non-residential, because we've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah.
And when we talked about it last year, we had this calendar, and in that red box, it said that we needed to get a rate amendment to council or to the finance committee by June. That never happened. I don't really know why. I was excited for it to happen, but it didn't happen. I think that we got kind of caught up in the actual rate change numbers and got distracted, and it didn't happen. So this year I've made that red box bigger, and I would like to recommend that you do it sooner, basically right away, which is why I didn't want to postpone this session today, so that we can get that amendment to the finance committee and get it through review. I'm still proposing that we have a 100-day waiver period once it starts, so that we can kind of provide technical assistance and get people on board before we just triple some people's fees.
Yeah.
But it needs to start now if we're gonna do that.
Yeah. No, it just compliments you on, it's so incredibly helpful to see this charted out as far as when you're planning on doing these things. It just helps us really understand what to expect.
Yeah, and for the residential, I mean, we can also make a calendar for that, but there's no way we could potentially get that done in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
All the things that would need to happen. So we have at least a year to work on it, and we can talk further about, whether you do want to do that financial analysis and the impact analysis, we can do that. Those are my recommendations for the moment.
I mean, I see the benefit of having it by April 1, but also it could just get incorporated into the general fee schedule that gets introduced when the mayor introduces his budget. So we could have a little bit more leeway on that, right? I thought you were going to say something. No. Meaning, we could potentially have a little bit more time on it, I would think. But
yes, I'm being more aggressive because
Okay.
it slipped last time, and we did get caught up in the discussion of the fee. But we were told by finance that it would need to be a specific amendment about the rate structure, not just the fee change, right?
Got it.
So I kind of just want to keep those in their own lanes, because they're not the same.
All right, so that's, so what is going to be introduced in the budget then?
So
Happened to
that
know.
blue bar, that's the second from the top,
Okay.
is the continuing every year, those discussions about the rate changes. And so we'll have Stantec in, I think, at the next Finance Committee meeting to talk through the rate change. And those discussions will happen, over the next 2 months, and then that will go to the Finance Committee for final approval with the budget.
Okay. Anything else?
Questions?
I got to tell you, this is one of the most detailed and impressive presentations I've ever seen in my time on the city council from any employee. Like, way to go. This is so much detail. It was so well done. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Yeah,
again, if you want to
100%.
watch it again, May 2025, YouTube.
Yes, yeah, excellent job. And I'm just thinking, like, I guess, I know this is nothing we need to rush, because I agree as far as let's focus on the non-residential, but, and maybe Stantec could help with this, but at some point next year, I would like to see some scenarios as far as if we did want to move all of us, in the direction of a tiered or ERU-based model for residential, what would the impact be on revenue?
Right.
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 And then associated staff costs that would have to be absorbed by the watershed fund, just so we can get an idea if it's something we would want to move forward with or not. I'm inclined to, just because I do want to make it more equitable and actually capture the actual impacts from these larger properties who are way underpaying what they actually contribute to degrading our water quality. And I feel like that feeds into the rate reduction program and giving them a reason to do what we're trying to get them to do as far as reducing impervious.
Understood. So, I mean, I did include what the cost for administrative, an estimate, but, and I did speak with Stantec. I didn't just come in here, off the cuff. And their recommendation was not to make this change at this time, but we could certainly continue to analyze that. And again, my recommendation would be also to take a hard look at the fee reduction program for residential and see how we can amp that up, because I think that it's a place for a possible impact.
Okay. All right. That's, yes, Alderman.
Just a minor thing. When we're thinking about, not rate structures, but like when we're calculating our impact, the impact of stormwater, do we consider delivery factors? Like, put it another way, is a house, maybe this is really a question for you, Ms. Gout, but is a house with, let's just make it up, 10,000 square feet of impervious surface right next to a creek better or worse for that creek than the same amount of impervious surface farther away from the waterway?
So you want to answer that? Go ahead. Okay. So our stormwater management requirements, we have different requirements for waterfront properties than non-waterfront properties. And there's critical area requirements as well. So the critical area requirements are pretty extensive. The stormwater management requirements, it's just a grading permit trigger, changes from 5,000 square feet for a non-waterfront property to 2,000 square feet for a waterfront property. That's maybe a little less significant than the critical area requirements. Mike, do you want to add on to that?
As far as, but you don't pay a higher fee if you're closer to the water or anything.
Right.
There are stricter requirements if you want to develop closer to the water or in the critical area,
change.
but the fee is not based on your location, your proximity to any resource or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I
that makes
don't even
total
think
sense.
that would be legal. We'd have to check the,
Yeah. No, the way the reason I asked the question is I was thinking about the fact that probably many of our particularly large properties, at least in my ward, or large in terms of having a lot of impervious surface, are right on the water, right? Like, if you have the money to buy waterfront property, you've probably also got money to build a big house there. And so I was thinking about if we implemented some rate structure that had a bigger impact on larger properties, how it would have a bigger impact also on properties that are closer to the water. And thus, if we had something like we have for the non-residential, where you could offset it by having some kind of compliance type thing, then maybe we would drive more of that near waterways. But anyway, I was just trying to get that crucial piece,
Yeah,
for whether it made sense or not.
We mentioned that the county does that marina program, so like,
Right.
they
Perfect
know
example.
that things close to the water and the activities that are going on, they're trying to target specific things for those areas, yeah. So.
Makes total sense, yep.
All right. We're out of time pretty much, so thank you so much again. Thank you. And Ms. Schild, I always do this to you.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have Jackie's report.
Yeah, I apologize. I'll put you up front at the next meeting, but I actually do have a meeting I need to get to soon, so I'll give you 5-10 minutes for, I know you have a lot to go through. Any key highlights? And first, is there anything from the committee that you really want to hear an update on?
Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, as far as on this list?
No, yeah.
Okay, all right, so,
Well, I guess streetlights, but you'll cover that probably. Streetlights.
Oh, streetlights, okay. So, yes, I will. Overall, my team is focused on building efficiency, reducing our energy usage and energy rates, and transportation initiatives that we work closely with Department of Transportation on, as well as putting more electrical vehicles in our fleet, from light duty to medium duty vehicles, and then working towards police and fire. So we do have a number of initiatives and grant applications in around solar on city facilities, and we're waiting on some of those grants, and we have some. And then the other thing would be transitioning lights to LED, which BG&E is working on all of the ones that they own and maintain, and the ones that the city owns but BG&E maintains. And they've done probably 2/3 of those at this point. They're LED. Then the remainder are city-owned and maintained. But we do have grant money, and we are working to move all of those over to LED at this time as well. The other thing that we're doing with light posts that are owned and maintained by the city is we have money to do 5 volt posts. Volt Post is a charging company, electric vehicle charging company, that you use the power off of the light pole. BG&E did not want us to use any of their light poles. Dylan Lakonich made a presentation to Historic Preservation Commission a couple of weeks ago that went rather well. They just didn't want any on Main Street. But we are looking at Hanover Street and West Street and one other area for the volt posts. So we can have charging on the street by people coming to do business or who live in the area, overnight charging, et cetera. Then we know we're looking at other areas to continue to put in electric vehicle charging. We do have grant money that we're putting in 2 L2s, so 4 ports, and 1 DC fast charger at the police station. So we're looking at doing facility by facility, and we thought we'd start with police, putting the infrastructure there so then we can buy the cruisers as well. But meantime, there are other vehicles like their parking enforcement and inspectors and day-to-day people in and out who are not using cruisers could use those and get them used to the idea and feel comfortable with electric vehicles. Part of the earmark request that I put into the federal earmark funding was for a solar on the roof of OEM police station headquarters, backed up by a microgrid and generator. So that would also go nicely with the EV charging, and we could use that for the EV charging. So that could be a completely clean energy fueled building over there and the infrastructure as well. So we're kind of excited about that. I did receive a letter from MDEM that said that was an eligible project, but only eligible as far as it affects the EOC. If we were to also include police headquarters with the microgrid and the solar power, the city would have to put money into that as well. But we do have grant money for that sort of thing, so we are looking at that.
I have a question. I do want to have a question on the The city ferry, electric ferry, well, now I know it's now a hybrid ferry, but
Yes.
because that is something that actually, that we've talked about in the past in relation to like Cars Beach, and because it could potentially be a connection for people to get from my ward downtown, and so so I'm just curious what the status is of.
Yep.
that.
So that's, which is now, the ferry is now a hybrid per the requirements of the federal government. And the RFP is ready to be advertised. However, the administration has asked us to put a pause on that and seek input from the Maritime Advisory Board on get a recommendation from the Maritime Advisory Board. So I've requested to have it put on this Tuesday's agenda, a short presentation on the ferry, where it stands, benefits, challenges, opportunities, and get their recommendations. The mayor wanted that before he would sign off on the new grant. It's a
RFP.
grant agreement that we would have to sign off on. And whether we would pursue that or not, we've had a lot of blowback from Eastport. Much of that is around parking and the fact that there's some misconception that the city's trying to get people to park in Eastport and then take the ferry over to City Dock, when it's quite the reverse. The idea is that people park in Hillman or somewhere else, come in by bike, bus, whatever, and then take the ferry over to Eastport, into the heart of Eastport. There's a little blowback on the 5th Street landing, mostly around parking again, which the city did not plan to encourage on 5th Street.
Can you share with the committee the materials that are getting shared with the Maritime Advisory Board?
Which materials?
I guess whatever is going to be in the presentation.
Oh, we will have the harbor master is putting together a few slides right now, really just showing possible routes for the ferry and like what a ferry boat would look like, so they don't have a misconception that it's a very large boat. It would have to be fairly small, about 38 feet at most, in order to fit at the 5th Street landing. And we have ideas about even going across the river to Holly Beach, which is now owned by DNR. It was purchased from Chesapeake Bay Foundation, so as a recreational stop. So it could be Holly Beach, Hawkins Cove, Cars Beach, and across the 5th Street, and then any other place you'd like to take it.
All right, I'm going to have to call it there.
Yep.
I will follow up with you on that, because I just want to have more of a conversation about the ferry.
Yeah, I just want to add real quickly, the greenhouse gas inventory is done and the climate action plan is going into draft form. I'm going to work on a work session for city council on the climate action plan, and also a public meeting date for the climate action plan.
For the council?
For the public meeting and for council, a work session with council.
Okay, good.
And that would most likely happen in April or early May.
Okay,
But I'll have a draft available to you before the meeting.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I promise we'll put you first on the agenda next time. All right, anything else we go to the order? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Or second.
You can't do both.
She moved it, I
Oh,
second.
she did, okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.